Hello, audio gear nerds of the internet. Today, we're talking about this. What is this? It's got tubes, big tubes, some small tubes, some knobs, a switch. What is it? It's a stereo amplifier, of course. And if you're looking at this thing, you might think that these are 6L6s and these are 12A somethings like an X7 or a U7, but no, you would be wrong. You are wrong. These are not 6L6s. These are 6A V5s. These are Russian. I know we don't like Russia right now because they're bombing and trying to take over a country. But these are Russian, what are they? 6N2P EV tubes. I saw this available used on the internets, and I thought, the heck are those tubes? I need to hear what this thing sounds like. This is an amp made by a guy out of Canada, of all places, that makes these things. The name that they go by are Ideal Innovations. This is called the Elite80. Why it's called 80, I can speculate. And I think I'll tell you my speculation. I speculate that it's called that because the guy who makes these claimed that these put out 40 watts per channel through some math, not RMS. These are actually 20 per channel RMS. They how does it sound? We'll get there. Slow down. Stop pushing me. Let's talk about the features of this guy. So I saw this thing and I was kind of in love with the look of it. It kind of reminds me of the Dynaco ST70 with everything sort of on top, everything wide open. What is interesting is back here, you have your power input right there, and then you have your speaker terminals there. Not on the back side, but right there. Which I thought was interesting. This is your on-off switch. These are your Rca Inputs. Why are they on the front? I would assume it was a decision based on the idea that the shortest path is the best path. So everything happens here. All the magic happens here. This is connected right to these are the pots that control the volume for each of the channels, which is kind of nice because you don't have to worry about a balance knob. If you have a wonky room or whatever, you can kind of balance it as that works for you. It's kind of an interesting concept. I kind of like it. Let's talk about when I got this thing. I got this thing in the mail. I got dirt on it from my little green pad. Oh no, I'll have to wipe that off later. I bought this from a guy who I don't think he really knew what it was, because it's weird. And I did some Google searching and I found out what it was. There's a sticker on the back that I can show you. The light might be preventing us from reading it well. But, so you can see here that here's the 6V5GAs. And then over here, it says 6N2P. when I got this, it did not have those tubes in it. It had 12AX7s. What it actually had was Telefunken 12AX7s, which are crazy expensive. So I was excited by that, but what I wasn't excited by was the fact that it wasn't using the right tubes. Like it says right there. Well, if you could read that, let's adjust the light. Maybe we don't need this light. Maybe you still can't read it very well, but you'll have to believe me because I don't feel like picking this thing up. It's not super heavy, as these things tend to be, but this is going to get old moving this thing around. Not going to lie. So it didn't have those tubes. It had 12AX7s. And so I wondered, well, is that wrong? Or has it been modified? Or did someone just throw the wrong tubes in there because they assumed that it's a 9-pin preamp tube type socket? I'm just going to throw some 9-pin tubes in there and hope for the best. So I emailed Sid, this is the guy's name at Ideal Innovations, and I said, hey, I got this model number, and I got this serial number. What should be in there? And according to him, he said it should be those tubes. So I did a thing that I don't, I kind of do all the time, is I opened it up. Now, danger, high voltage inside. Danger. Tube amps have gigantic electrolytic capacitors. Gigantic. And those things can hold a charge sometimes for a week. So even if you turn this thing off, and if you don't know what electrolytic capacitor looks like, you don't know how to check the voltage, and you don't know how to discharge them, never open one of these things. Extremely dangerous. Potentially very dangerous. It could kill you. And some people may have been zapped with, hey, I got zapped with a 220 line at my house. I didn't die, so why do I have to worry about this? Well, guess what? Some of those things hold 400 volts. And if you accidentally touch it, now you're grounding. You're grounding it, it goes right through your heart, and you're dead. You're dead. I don't want you to be dead. So know what you're doing. I'm not saying don't open it. I'm saying know what you're doing first. I'm sure there's videos out there on how to discharge capacitors. I'm not going to do that. I don't want that responsibility. Do what you can to learn how to not die. Someone probably cares about you. I don't. I don't know who you are. Write a comment down there, and I'll care about you, because then I'll know that you exist. But whatever. Back to my story. So, wrong tubes. Awesome that I got Telefunken 12AX7s. I don't have any of those in my collection. So that was a happy day, but not happy day that it's the wrong tubes. So I plugged it in anyway, and it sounded kind of off. There was some weird... it didn't sound terrible, but the frequencies were kind of weird. Didn't sound particularly good. Didn't sound bad, but didn't sound good. So I took it apart. I sent pictures of the inside to Sid. Sid looked at it and said, hey, there's there are resistors going to the cathode that those shouldn't be there. And in fact, those resistors are right here. Here they are. There was one to each of the preamp tubes cathode. And so I finally got him to confirm that everything else looked good except for that. And so I asked him, like, it's connected to a green wire, which I just looked at. I'm like, oh, that must be a ground wire. But then I noticed later on that it was actually going to the output transformers. These are the output transformers. And that seemed weird. And so he said that green tap from the the output transformers was actually the 16 ohm tap that's in there, because these are 8 ohm. You could change it to 16. But for in terms of modifications, that's the craziest modification I've ever heard of. Like, there's no reason to connect the 16 ohm tap to the cathode of the preamp tubes. I can't even wrap my mind around the fact someone would do that. But someone did that. So I removed that. I tied up the transformer taps, and I ordered some proper tubes. Proper 6N2Ps from a guy on eBay. They're matched. They were relatively inexpensive. Shipped for 2 matched tubes of these things. It cost me $28. So that was cool. I tested these on my ICO tube tester, and they all tested fine. So I knew I was ready to go. So I plugged this thing in. I've plugged it into my Noob Sound preamp. There's a review of that. Go check it out. It's actually quite a cool preamp, especially for the money. It's all tube. And I did what I would normally do with this, and I turned it all the way up. Right? Because if this were just a power amp, so basically this is an integrated amplifier with one input. And to replicate the idea of it being a power amp, you turn up both of these, and then you control the amount of input going into it with your preamp. So I did that, and it did not sound very good. It sounded very mid-rangey. There was not a whole lot of bass. And these are relatively low. This is a low output amp, relatively speaking. Now, 20 watts of tube power is way different than 20 watts of like a solid state power. You could usually crank a tube amp a little bit more than a solid state amp, and because the clipping of a tube amp is not as horrible sounding as the clipping of a solid state amp. So you can usually get away with juicing it a little bit harder. But even still, 20 watts per channel is... I have KEF R300s. They are 89 dB efficient, which isn't super efficient, but is pretty efficient. It's not too bad. But they recommend at least 25 watts. So buying this, I knew that this might not be the best use case for my speakers, but I tried it anyway to help you guys out, to bring you interesting content, and this is one of the most interesting tube amplifiers I've seen. So not everything didn't sound so great, so I was kind of bummed out. And then I started turning this down. I turned these down, and it sounded a lot better. It sounded way better. And I got it to about maybe halfway, 50%, and it sounded really pretty good. I was like, huh, that's interesting. So if you have one of these, I have 2 suggestions. One suggestion, well, yeah, I'll just tell you my suggestions. I won't bury the lead. So if you want to put a preamp in front of this, so you can have multiple things connected to it, I would probably go with something like the Rca Saga, where it's a what do you call it? What's the thing? You know, the preamp type. Passive, that's what I'm looking for, passive. So I think what was going on, because even when I turned these down and turned the preamp up, it did not sound as good as when I just plugged my CD player or my turntable directly into this. That sounded way better. And so I'm guessing that this thing does not want to be juiced on the front end. Like, you probably want something passive, something that's not going to actually add gain to the front end of this. One of the other things I found interesting, Sid told me that these are linear pots, and honestly I think that they should be logarithmic because they're volume pots, and that would help, because it really seems like when I was listening, even when I was listening to it directly in here, I would get to, you know, like 30%, and then it really started compressing everything and distorting. So the sweep was really narrow where I would consider it a usable range. But it sounded pretty good. I've had a lot of tube amps in my day. I've had a Rogue Audio Kronos with EL34s, the original one. I had a Kronos Magnum 2 with, I don't remember what is in it. I think it's either KT88s or KT 120s maybe? I don't remember. Someone comment down below. Tell me what I had, because I don't remember. It was a long time ago. It was like 7 years ago. I can't be expected to remember that far back. I can't remember what I had for lunch yesterday. I've had Audio Research VSI 55. I've had some really other expensive stereos, tube stereos. This sounded better than some of them. So this, the list price on this guy, and I don't know if it's Canadian or American. He's a Canadian. I'm going to assume it's American. No, I'm not going to assume it's American. Inverse. I'm going to assume that it's Canadian prices, which would mean that this thing, he's listing for 2,000 Canadian. I would assume that, it'd be, I think the exchange rate's about 20% off. So it would be, 1,600. Some of those will cost way more than that. So if you have a passive preamp, or if you just have a single thing that you want to plug into this could be your guy. As interesting as these tubes are in here, as I have to keep stopping the video to yell at my kids because it sounds like they're herding elephants upstairs, which they might be. I don't know. I haven't been up there in a little bit. One of my concerns with this amp would be that these tubes are cool, right? Like, but no one's making these things. Like, you have to find these new old stock, which isn't so bad because you can usually find them for about $8 a piece, which isn't bad, but you might not find 4 of them matched. And then, so this also doesn't have an adjustable bias, and it's not cathode biased. So that's a problem. He sells them. You can buy a quad of these and 2 preamp tubes, but I think he's charging like 300 something bucks, which is, I kind of think that's a little overboard on those prices. If it was like 150 bucks, I would be more about it. But so what I would do if I own this, if I was going to keep this thing, I would change out these pots. I would put logarithmic pots in there. I might do, the audiophile thing and put some audiophile grade capacitors. There's a capacitor that goes directly from here to there. I might swap that out. I've got these. Can you see that? Can you see that? No. These are Aura caps that I have had forever. I would probably put those in there. I would probably also take this to my buddy who's way better at amps than I am. I know a little bit, relatively speaking. He knows a lot of it. And I would have him put in pots so that he could actually adjust the bias on these guys. Probably one on each channel. So you could actually buy matched pairs and not have to worry about paying that guy in Canada 340 bucks for new ones. So it's cool, but I'd probably rather it be using more common type output tubes. I'm fine with the preamp tubes. Now I think he makes it with 12AX7s. But I mean, it sounds good with those, and these are readily available. I mean, up until there's a war going on, and then maybe they're not so readily available anymore. but I guess that's true for most tubes because, you know, they're made in either the Czech Republic, China, or the vast majority of them are made at New Sensor, which would be all of your reissues and like Sovtek and Electro-Harmonics. All of those are made in Russia, and to what degree we're going to be able to get those in a year, who knows? But, I mean, these things, I mean, this isn't new. I think this is a 2008 amp, and I don't know how much time was put on these things. He must have these running pretty low. I kind of wanted to check the plate voltage on these guys. I think he has the bias set pretty low on them because they have a lot of life left. So maybe that's not even a big deal. Like, unless you break one, you might be fine for a little bit anyway. Or for a lot of it, because, you know, 2008 was, what is it? The math on that is 14 years ago. And tubes normally don't last 14 years if you're riding them hard. But these ones are still good. So, would I suggest buying this? If you're in Canada, I would maybe try to audition one before you buy it, because maybe it's not going to work for you. I would also recommend, if I was keeping this, I would want to plug it into speakers that were more efficient, maybe 91 plus. So that way you didn't have to juice this as much. That would maybe help, because it sounds good, but it's definitely not as clear as my noob sound into my Shiite Vidar. There's a clarity and precision that this doesn't have, but, you know, tubes, you know that going in, that the tubes aren't going to be as revealing and as detailed as a solid state amp. So knowing that going in, I was not particularly surprised at that, but you could probably get it a bit more detailed if you don't have to crank this as much. So, what have we learned? When you buy something used, watch out, because people do all kinds of weird stuff. These tubes are actually pretty cool sounding. One more thing about the sound. I was concerned that a lot of lower, and I don't know that I would consider 20 watts per channel low, but it's relatively low, right? Like if you see some of those audio research amps that have, you know, like 100 6550s in them, like it's low compared to that for sure. It still had a lot of bass. You're not going to be missing bass out of this thing. Detail, yeah, but in terms of solid state, you're not going to be missing the bass. So if Canadians, check it out. If you're in the US, I don't know that I would import one of these without testing it. I will be selling that, so if you want to buy it and check it out, that's cool. But I don't know. Is this cool? I'm kind of sick of doing the phono preamp stuff. I did 1 billion of those reviews. I actually have one more coming that isn't budget. It is the list price on that phono preamp is more than the list price on this guy. Can you imagine? Don't tell my wife. I didn't tell her that I bought that thing. We might have a problem. Keep that to her. Good thing my wife doesn't watch my videos. So cool. If you have any questions, put them in the comments below. If you like this, like it. If you don't like it, don't like it. Or maybe even dislike it. I don't care. And then if you want to see some other videos, subscribe, because I have some more stuff coming out. I have another tube amp, another integrated tube amp that I bought that'll be here probably Tuesday. Although FedEx, little unreliable post-COVID, so it might be here, who knows when. It's supposed to be here Tuesday. It's still kind of far away, and it's Sunday night, so we'll see. But that will be interesting, because that one, I bought it knowing the owner says it doesn't work. But I have a theory. I have multiple theories. My one theory is that it's a bad tube. Please let that be the problem, because if it's a bad one of these guys, one of these output transformers, trying to replace it's going to be a problem. So, subscribe. I have some more stuff coming down the pipe that you might like. It also would be nice to have 1,000 subscribers, because that means something in the world of YouTube. So, hook a brother up. I would subscribe to your channel if you have one. If you have a channel, put it in the comments. I'll like it. I'll subscribe. I'll watch your videos, unless they're weird. There's only so much weirdness I can take. But yeah, thanks for watching, and keep an eye out for more videos. Thank you.